Jayam Vishnupad Paramahansa Varivraj Gacharja Astu Tarasi Srimad is Divine Grace Abhay Charanam Bhakti Vedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai Grantara Srimad Bhagavatam Ki Jai Harinam Sankirtan Ki Jai Brihat Pradanga Chancellor Book Distribution Ki Jai Kartik Brata Ki Jai Samaveda Bhakta Vrinda Ki Jai Nittai Gaura Vimanandi. All glories to the sum of the devotees, all glories to the sum of the devotees, all glories to the sum of the devotees, all glories to Sri Gauranga. Nama Om Vishnu Padaya Krishna Padasai Budale Srimati Bhaktivedanta Swami Namani Namaste Saraswati Deve Gauravani Vacharani Vishesha Shunyavadi Pasta Chalishatarani Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Reading from Srimad Bhagavatam, first canto, chapter 18, entitled Parikit, cursed by a Brahmana boy. Text number 26. Pratirudendriya pranam mano buddhim uparatam stana tayat param praptam brahma bhutam avikriyam Pratirudendriya prana mano buddhim uparatam stanatrayat param praptam Brahma bhutam avikriyam Pratirudendriya prana mano buddhim uparatam stanatrayat param praptam Brahma bhutam avikriyam. Ladies, Pratirudendriya prana mano buddhim uparatam stanatrayat param praptam Brahma bhutam avikriyam Rati Purandriya Prana. Pratiruddha, restrained. Indriya, the sense organs. Prana, air of respiration. Mana, the mind. Buddhim, intelligence. Upadatam, inactive. Sthana, places. Trayat, from the three. Param, transcendental. Praptam, achieved. Brahmabhutam, qualitatively equal with the Supreme Absolute. Avikriyam, unaffected. Translation and purport by His Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. The Muni's sense organs, breath, mind, and intelligence were all restrained from material activities, and he was situated in a trance apart from the three: wakefulness, dream, and unconsciousness. Having achieved a transcendental position qualitatively equal with the Supreme Absolute. Please repeat. The Muni's sense organs, breath, mind, and intelligence were all restrained from material activities, and he was situated in a trance apart from the three: wakefulness, dream, and unconsciousness. Having achieved a transcendental position qualitatively equal with the Supreme Absolute. Purport. It appears that the Muni, in whose hermitage the king entered, was in yogic trance. The transcendental position is attained by three processes, namely the process of Gyan, or theoretical knowledge of transcendence, the process of Yoga, or factual realization of trance by manipulation of the physiological and psychological functions of the body, and the most approved process of Bhakti Yoga, or the engagement of senses in the devotional service of the Lord. In the Bhagavad Gita also we have the information of the gradual development of perception from matter to a living entity. Our material mind and body develop from the living entity, the soul, and being influenced by the three qualities of matter, we forget our real identity. The jnana process theoretically speculates about the reality of the soul, but Bhakti Yoga factually engages the spirit soul in activities. The perception of matter is transcended to still subtler states of the senses. The senses are transcended to the subtler mind, and then to breathing activities, and gradually to intelligence. Beyond the intelligence, the living soul is realized by the mechanical activities of the yoga system, or practice of meditation, restraining the senses, regulating the breathing system, and applying intelligence to rise to the transcendental position. This trance stops all material activities of the body. The king saw the Muni in that position. He also saw the Muni as follows. Om Ajnanatimidam Dasya Gyananjana Shalakaya Chakshun Militam Jaina Tasmai Sri Gurave Namaha Gam Guroti Vachalam Pangam Langayate Girim Yarkipatam Hamade Sri Gurum Dinatani Paramanandam Madhavam Sri Chaitanya Ishwaram. The translation again. The Munis' sense organs, breath, mind, and intelligence were all restrained from material activities, And he was situated in a trance apart from the three, wakefulness, dream, and unconsciousness, having achieved a transcendental position qualitatively equal with the Supreme Absolute. So here, Srila Prabhupada is very nicely describing what most people in yogic circles these days consider Hatha Yoga. And as Srila Prabhupada is pointing out here, it's a very mechanical process. And coming upon this Muni in his hermitage, engaged in this activity, saw that the sage was in trance, which is generally the goal of those who are engaged in these mechanical processes. Their idea is to become focused upon the Supersoul, the Lord in the heart. Or at least, at a minimum, to be able to recognize that one is not, one is a spirit soul and not this body. And of course, this is something that was applicable in previous ages, where certain facilities were there. The yogis could go to a hermitage in a very quiet and a sacred place and engage in such activities. And even to this day, you can, Srila Prabhupada comments that there are yogis who come down who are hundreds of years old. In one lecture, Srila Prabhupada was pointing out how in his youth he personally saw different sages who were hundreds of years old. Of course, this is beyond the understanding of the intelligentsia, the so-called intelligentsia of present society, who consider that how is this that someone can live for hundreds of years? But we take it as fact from the Vedic literatures, and we take it as fact from the pure devotees of the Lord who are giving us this information. But even still today, you can go to some of these places, and sometimes you see different sadhus coming out from a little cave. I went to Badrinath one year, and I was walking up past the temple as you go further up, where Srila Vyasadev's cave is, where if you go inside, there's a beautiful murti of Vyasadeva speaking to Sukadeva Goswami. Very transcendental. But you can go up, and up further, and I believe that's where, up a little further is where Bhimasen went after the battle of Kurukshetra. Is described that he went to this place and he left his body. And they have a nice little temple there that memorializes that. But in the course of going up, I remember we were going through these little pathways, not very big. In some areas they're a little bit bigger, so those who can't walk it, they're carried by palanquin, which is really quite amazing. Two carriers have this one person in the palanquin, and they work their way up, all the way up. And you can imagine, it's not, I mean, just without a palanquin, it's quite a task walking. But to take someone on palanquin all the way up, just see their devotion. They're so determined to go to these wonderful places. But in the course of walking up, I recall looking to the side, and off in little corners, sometimes you would see, in various little corners, you would see little cutouts, little caves in the hillside, mountainside, and there'd be a little door, an actual little door. And I saw one sadhu. He came out. He was just a little fellow. He opened up his door. He got out and he stood up. When he stood up, he was medium height, but he would crawl into this little cave, and whatever he's engaged in, whatever kind of tapasya it may be. But he walked in, he came out, and closed the door behind him and locked it up. He had a little padlock. And then he got down and went off toward the Ganga to take his bath. And in some places they weren't so developed. You would just see some burlap sack right over the entranceway. So still to this day you can go to such places and you can find these sadhus who are engaged in various austerities. Here Srila Prabhupada is pointing out that this transcendental process or position is attained by three processes. There's a jnana, yoga, and then a bhakti. Of course, jnana is, as the Bhagavatam explains, Vasudeva Param Jnanam, the real purpose of jnana or yoga, or cultivation of knowledge, is to understand Vasudeva. There's no other purpose of course, there are so many side goals that one may envision or strive for, but the real purpose of jnana, Vasudeva Param Jnanam, that Vasudeva is the real goal of developing knowledge, as Krishna says in Bhagavad Gita, right? Vedaisya sarve ahang eva vedya. Krishna is understood. The absolute truth is understood by study of the Vedas. And otherwise, we can speculate all day about what the absolute truth is, and never get anywhere. But the real purpose is to understand Vasudeva. And here Prabhupada points out that that is one of the processes. The other process, or that process, would be a theoretical knowledge of transcendence. It's theoretical. Okay, we're understanding that the absolute truth is not this, it's not that. But what is it? And one may come to some theoretical understanding of what the absolute truth is. And when one becomes fixed in that, it is a level of transcendence. One realizes that, well, I'm not this body, that the suffering that's associated with this material body is not affecting me directly. It's simply these senses which are reacting. So it's one level. The other process Srila Prabhupada points out is the process of yoga. Vasudeva Para Yoga. The real purpose of yoga is to understand Vasudeva. There's no other goal. Again, it's something that's very fashionable in the present age to practice yoga and go to some institute on a corner, and everybody has their yogic dress, and they know all of these symbols, and there's a little bit of artwork, maybe burn a little incense. So that's yoga. And then afterwards, everyone just sort of socializes or goes back to work or does whatever they want to do, go to a party or something. Um, so really, that's not the purpose. But the real purpose is to understand or realize Him or the personality of Godhead. And the other process Srila Prabhupada points out here is the most approved process of Bhakti Yoga, or the engagement of the senses in devotional service of the Lord. This is considered the topmost process, as Krishna himself says, and we accept Krishna's word. We accept Krishna as the absolute truth. So when he says that the highest of all processes is Bhakti Yoga, and that one who is engaged in that devotional service is the highest of yogis, and he's the highest of jnanis, we accept that. And that, and as Prabhupada points out here, that process of bhakti is engagement of the senses in the devotional service of the Lord. These processes are also, as Prabhupada points out here, step by step revealed in the Bhagavad Gita, where one understands that first there are the material elements, bhumir, apo, nalo, vayu, kamano, buddhir, eva cha. There are certain elements which are there in the material creation that comprise this material world. Everything is basically these elements, although there may be, the scientists like to expand on it in all of their speculations and studies. But Krishna makes it very simple by explaining that bhumir, apo, nalo, vayu, that there's earth, water, fire, air, and ether. And these are the basic elements of the material creation. And that there's again, a subtler, more advanced, as Prabhupada points out here in the purport, there's a gradual elevation that occurs, that one then realizes a more subtler things like the mind, intelligence, and ego. And the Bhakti Yoga process recognizes all of them, but Krishna gives, again, more information by pointing out that the living being, aparayam itastvanyam prakritim vidime param, that the living entity is actually of a higher nature. So the yogis, they may be involved in so many austerities and with the intent of understanding the absolute truth. But until one comes to that process or to that level of recognizing that the living being is separate from these material elements, and that he has a relationship with the supreme absolute truth, it's not perfect. It's not complete, as Prabhupada points out here. That the most approved process of bhakti yoga, or the engagement of senses in the devotional service of the Lord, is considered the topmost. And that sort of life, on that level of understanding, Prabhupada very nicely described it the other day during the Sunday lecture. He was describing how this is called the apakrita position. Whereas all of the others, they're considered prakrita. They're still within the material realm. Purushak prakriti stohi bhunkti prakritir jangana. And because they're still affected or disturbed or contaminated by the modes of material nature. It's very nice. Srila Prabhupada points out here in the translation that he was in a trance apart from the three, wakefulness, dream, and unconsciousness, free from the modes of the effects of the modes of material nature. So that is the apakrita life. Whereas the others, those who are still speculating or engaged in yogic practices, not understanding what the goal of that yoga is, they may be to a level of transcendence, but it's not perfect. Even the jnanis and yogis, they're also considered transcendentalists, but they're not perfect in their practice, in their understanding, because again, they're not understanding that the goal is to be engaged in transcendental activity. The jnana process theoretically speculates about the reality of the soul, but bhakti yoga factually engages the spirit in activities. So the real goal is to be engaged in transcendental activities. As Prabhupada was pointing out again during this wonderful lecture he gave on Sunday, that the real perfection of austerities, the real perfection of development of knowledge, the real perfection of whatever works we may be engaged in, is to be engaged in devotional service. And he finished his lecture so nicely by pointing out how in the present age, of course, what we're seeing here was happening so many years ago, thousands of years ago. So in those days, again, the practitioners had certain qualifications. We don't have those facilities now. Again, we can't go to some secure, sacred, quiet place. It's not possible. You may be in the most pristine place, but then all of a sudden you hear from 30,000 feet an airplane flying overhead. It may be very idyllic in that regard, but again, we're disturbed by so many things and so many circumstances in this day and age. So the process most recommended in this day and age, as Prabhupada was pointing out, is the Sankirtan Yagya, Kaler Dosha Nidhe Rajan. The process for becoming sufficiently purified or properly engaged is to be engaged in the process of chanting the holy names of the Lord. What is that last verse of the Bhagavatam? Nama Sankirtanam Yasya Sarva Papa Pranashanam. The Bhagavatam tells us that the chanting of the holy names of the Lord is so powerful that it delivers one from all of the pop or the sinful activities that were knowingly or unknowingly engaged in throughout the day. Unfortunately, people don't realize that, although they may be so in their eyes pious, or they're engaged in good works, still because it's not free from the modes of material nature, it's not considered apakrita activities. Instead, it's considered prakrita. They're engaging in activities according to the modes of material nature. Oh, it's a good thing to do. Let's help the birds, or let's help the insects, or the snakes, or let's help such and such suffering condition. It's still not complete. Nama Sankirtanam Sarva Papa Paranashanam. But the holy name of the Lord is so powerful that it delivers one from all of the sinful reactions, and it relieves one of all material suffering. Not only is one delivered from all of the sinful reactions that we may sometimes engage in or be implicated in, or from the past, not necessarily even this lifetime, but one is relieved of all of that, and then relieved of all of these sufferings that come in accord with that activity, with that past activity. So the real process is, as Prabhupada points out here, is the process of Bhakti Yoga, which is considered the most approved process, the process which is best recommended for the miseries of this material age. This Muni, this yogi, was engaged in his trance, trying to also come to that platform of pure consciousness, and by arrangement of the Lord, as we heard yesterday, as Prabhupada pointed out in the previous purport, by the arrangement of the Lord, what was the word that he used? I can't remember the exact word that Srila Prabhupada used, but by some, not accident, but by fate, the king came across this sage, and how he responds to his meeting is to be explained in the following verses, which is going to be quite interesting. So we'll end there. Are there any questions or comments? Yes, Prabhu.
You were saying at one point you quoted that verse that explains the 5 elements discussed in this,
Bhumir Apona Lova.
yeah, from Bhagavad Gita, and you said that scientists, they like to expand on these five elements and with a lot of their mental speculation. And I was wondering if you can explain how some of the German like scientists and philosophers, they studied the Vedas. I know Schrodinger used to study Upanishads. He's basically like the father of like quantum physics. And also, I heard in one class where from Radhanath Swami, he was saying that Charles Darwin got his theory of evolution from the Vedas, but he twisted it with his mental speculation. And also, a lot of people say that Albert Einstein used to read Bhagavad Gita, but I don't know if that's clear information. I also heard that might have been a rumor, but I was wondering if you could talk on
You
that.
should ask the scientist.
It's always good to have some documentation of these things. I mean, Srila Prabhupada many times did say that, and there is a concept of evolution in the Vedic literature. It's the evolution of the soul through the different kinds of material bodies. So that concept of evolution is there, but if you don't understand the existence of the soul, then a scientist like Darwin will kind of misunderstand and think it's the material body that's evolving and not the soul. It is a fact that some of the scientists who were responsible for quantum physics studied, the Upanishads and got some ideas from there. So that's about all I can say about it. I don't know if he did or not. I mean, some scientists did, like physicist Robert Oppenheimer, who was the scientist in charge of developing the atomic bomb for America in World War II. He studied the Bhagavad Gita, and when the first atomic bomb was tested at Alamogordo in New Mexico, he was asked about it, and he said it was like, Krishna revealing to Arjuna his form, time I am, the destroyer of the worlds, so he was quoting those verses from the Bhagavad Gita. So, as far as Einstein, I'm not sure if he studied the Gita or not.
Any other questions or comments on that? Jai. Srila Prabhupada ki jai.
Namah Vishnu Padaya Krishna Prastaya Bhutale Srimate Bhakti Vedanta Swamin Ite Namani.
Shortly after Srila Prabhupada sent us to Hawaii in 1969, in those days people didn't have money, they had to go out and get jobs to open a temple. So we were there, and naturally we started, Gorsunder was working, and I also got a job as a secretary, having been a typist with him. So I was pretty much for about 2 months, I guess it was, around a constant non-devotee association. Although the interesting thing was I was chanting all my rounds, getting up at 4:30 or 5:30 in the morning, packing Gorsunder's lunch and my lunch, and then going into town, which was an hour away. And I was very determined and focused about what I was there for, which was to acquire a place and open a center for Srila Prabhupada. In so doing, I got a job as an executive secretary. Even though I had no previous experience, I had great skills. So I got a job with a big company as the secretary to the vice president, which was prestigious and well-paying in those days, not by today's standards. And so what I did was I really focused on this. I worked for about 2.5 months to get this position. Many interviews and many, to do this was an accomplishment. Then suddenly, out of the blue, we got a telegram from Prabhupada. He was arriving in a few days to Hawaii. And I was like, I have to quit my job. There's no one to take care of him because Gorsunder was working, and it meant basically I had just been with him over a year, doing the housework and the cooking and the whatnot, secretary. It meant I had to drop my job and go back to the role that I had, which I never wanted to leave, but it's just that I was focused along this track. So I was very upset. The reason I was very upset that he was coming so soon. First of all, this is Maya, to even think like that. But I was upset because we had 2 wretched aluminum pots. I was accustomed to giving him the best of Altadena milk and the nicest of everything. We had nothing. We were just getting started. It was like we were there less than 2 months. Maybe it was even 6 weeks or something. And I only worked at my brand new job for about 1.5 weeks. And I had to quit. So I was so upset that when we went to pick him up in our funky old orange truck, I would not speak to him. I was livid. Hard to believe, I know. I was so upset. I was just like, how could you do this? I wasn't ready. My mood was, I wasn't ready. This is premature. I wasn't ready. I know this is hard to believe, but I lived through this. So hear me out, please. So he knew, because he always read my mind, Srila Prabhupada's mystic opulences, trust me, I lived with him for over a year. There's tons of him. He could read your mind from 6,000 miles away. He even wrote me a letter once from India. I know your mind. Not a problem, because he had, as I explained yesterday, the Siddhis. He actually told me that because the spiritual master is with Krishna at all times, Krishna is in the heart of all living entities. According to what Krishna wants him to know, he could keep up with his disciples in that way. And if you think of him, he will think of you. He even said that. If you're thinking of me, I'm thinking of you. So he can't be limited. This is important, that he can't be limited like an ordinary us I mean, if the yogis have siddhis, what to speak of a Mahabhagavat like Srila Prabhupada? So, angry young girl sitting in an old orange truck, a Ford at that. Prabhupada is in the middle, and Gracinda's driving, and I'm here. I was polite, but I was not particularly welcoming, because I didn't know how I was going to fly. I didn't know how I was going to pull this off with no pots and no. I was in anxiety. That was the source of it. So this went on for about a day and a half, and everything clicked back to our usual schedule, which was Prabhupada would get up in the early morning and translate. I would fix the breakfast. He would go for his walk at the beach park. I mean, everything just, even though I was upset, life went on. His schedule never missed a beat. I fixed his room, I fixed his bookcase, had his books, everything was done. It's just that inside I was upset, and he knew it. And I knew it too. I knew my consciousness was not quite right. So our custom was that in the evening, for months, you know, for the whole time, we would sit and chant japa in the evening in front of the deities. This is just what we did. After the class, or after the lecture, or after a program, he and I would just, and sometimes Krishna would sit and chant japa and look at the deities. In this particular 2 days later, it wasn't very long, maybe it was a day and a half, I was sitting right up by the altar, and I had put his Radha Krishna deities on the altar that he carried in his little red doll suitcase. They were up on the altar, nicely decorated, and I was sitting and chanting and looking at the deities. And Srila Prabhupada was way in the back of a room perhaps twice the length and width, a fairly large room. Toward the very back corner, he was sitting and chanting japa. And I was sitting and chanting japa and looking at his deities. And all of a sudden, this huge wave of realization came over me. A feeling of bhakti, of love, of wanting to serve, of divine love. Just, it washed over me. And all these realizations just flooded my consciousness. And I realized I had lost it. I had lost the essence of bhakti. Although I was doing all